Welcome to episode 23 of the Killzone podcast. My next guest is fresh off a top finish, taking first place at the Transatlantic Open. He was just here for episode 17 talking about his second place finish at BAO. Now he's back again with a big win. While I do hope to cover his tourney-winning Imperial Guard team briefly, I also kind of want to use our time today to peel back the layers of the player in the hopes of finding general wisdom, thoughts, or approaches that can work for any team and any player. So, without further ado, welcome to the show, Mr. Matthew Fong, aka Micromancer. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Good to be back.
Woo! Good to have you back, man. So let's see. Gottfried, Katachan stuff, hot shot volley guns, and Rain and Rao. Did I miss anything?
Well, that's the Dark Elder killing side of it.
Okay, so there was more.
I mean, I've got the plasma guns on there and whatnot,
Okay.
and the flamers. Like Pius is on there as well. They just didn't see much play in the. I don't know. I think at least half my games this tournament were against Dark Eldar, so that's most of what people saw.
Yeah, so it's like you only win against Dark Eldar. We only get to see the Dark Eldar part of the roster then, is how it worked out, huh?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Dark Eldar was a huge thing, and you seemed to have picked up their number and found a very effective way of dealing with them. Can you kind of go into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So especially the Mandrake heavy Dark Eldar that we were seeing predominantly in this tournament. You're always just looking for like volume of shots on those guys. That's how you get things done. The hot shot volley guns are like a perfect counter for them. You've got 4 shots, strength 4, AP -2. So they can get the hits off on the mandrakes that you need to get them down. But they can also, there's like not really a target on the Dark Elder list aside from a grotesque that's going to give them any trouble. Lots of teams that bring like volume of shot strategy, they're going to struggle against like stuff like the Incubi or the Clavex. But the hot shots have like AP -2, so they're great for that as well. I guess, do you want to go like pretty in deep into like the anti-Dark Eldar play that I did, or you want to leave it there? What do you think?
Sure, we can talk a little bit more about it if you want to kind of go into anything like specific. It doesn't have to be match to match. I think that you're going to be doing something like that with the Killzone podcast or the Command Point podcast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we can keep it kind of agnostic if you want.
Yeah. So there were a lot of things with this list that really helped like control the board. There were kind of 2 parts, 2 like main goals with it. You want to put like a lot of shots out, but I also was really trying hard to deny the Dark Eldar from getting like anything into close combat. So what I was kind of doing, I'd establish my gun lines, zone out from my own side of the board really heavily. I would offset Gottfried in the middle onto one side of the board, and then control the other side of the board with my leader and his orders. And there'd usually be a flamer on that side as well. So I'd push up with the flamer to really zone him back even farther from the side where Gottfried wasn't. And then if he drops like a bunch of guys at like 8.1 from the flamer, kind of setting up for a turn 2 charge on him, I'll just move him back into my own zone. So just kind of like a lot of push and pull on that leader side, while forcing him that if he is going to get any combat, it's going to be on Gottfried on the other side. I think having Rouse and Deep Strike also really helps with that. He can come out of Outflank for 1 CP with his once per game auto kill grenade kind of deal.
Yeah.
And that also kind of helps funnel things into the middle of the board. Like if they want to avoid the grenade, they can't go too close to the edges, which pushes them close to Gottfried again, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was kind of the general plan, was just I was happy to stay on my own side of the board, force them onto Gottfried, and play really conservative on the point game, like focus more on threatening his objectives than scoring my own.
Yeah, when I had the fortune to commentate your last two games in the best of three, and it was like you give the opponent like not a lot of options. It's like, okay, they want to get in combat, but they can't really, or you're spaced kind of far back, or maybe there's a flamer. You have deep striking stuff, so it's like if they're not in combat, anything that's left out becomes a potential target for that big grenade.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm like a pretty prep heavy player for these tournaments. Like I really go through my turn one movement pretty consistently ahead of time. Like even for this finals, like we didn't know the deployments till the day of, so I prepped all six.
That's interesting. I was going to
um,
ask you about that actually, because like I said, I was hoping to today kind of dig in a little bit to you as a player and kind of glean little pearls that people could apply to like any faction, not necessarily even just guard. Because you did well with, it's interesting, like you've done well with melee now through your heretics and the BAO, and then now a very kind of shooting team with guard at Transatlantic. So I was thinking maybe like in a little bit we could get into that, if that's okay.
sure.
All right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned prep, and I guess like it's kind of one of the things that I wanted to ask about. Like, how much of your success would you attribute to prep?
Um, like, well, it's all preparation, isn't it? Like, I think I'm always prepping the format in general, right? Like, if you come onto the Command Point Discord, I'm always on there looking for games.
Mm-hmm.
Um, unless you really don't want to get to a tournament and then be surprised. Was like you don't want to look at someone's list and be like, I have no plan for this. I didn't like prepare.
Mm-hmm.
So on that side of things, like preparation as far as just getting a lot of games in, that's super important for like just anything that you want to get good at in general. As far as like specific map prep or like game prep, I think there's not very many players out there that do as much of that as I do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, like there's some stuff I had planned. It didn't come to fruition in the finals just because we didn't hit those deployments. But there was some kind of like wonky problem solving that I had to do on some of them to figure out how to. I was going to zone out different areas,
Mm-hmm.
and without the prep, like I just it's not something that I would have thought up on the fly. Um. Anyway, yeah. So to answer the question, I think prep's hugely important for these ones where you're given the time to.
Uh-huh.
Um. At least play out like turn one movement yourself, assuming that you're going first.
Yeah, so I was going to ask kind of like, you kind of mentioned a few things. I was going to ask what kind of prep you do. So you're talking about you're actually physically playing the game, and then it sounds like potentially some sad hammer, maybe where you're setting up by yourself looking at the deployments.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I do too much like full sad hammer. Like I'm not really making rolls, playing both sides. What I'll be doing is I'll figure out my own deployment, where I want my models, and then I'll figure out I'll assume I'm going first and where I want each of those models moving. As far as like what the other guy's doing, like if he's playing a deep strike heavy team, I'm just accounting for that with my own zoning out. If he's got like shooters, I'll be kind of like doing measurements from their deployment zone, like, well, where could his guys possibly be standing and still shooting? Mostly though, yeah, I'm just kind of doing that turn one movement myself, and then I'll just call it at that. I'll just like fine tune the hell out of that, and then after that, everything after turn one movement, you don't know what the game's going to look like anymore.
Yeah. So you're taking the point that you do know kind of what you would the point of the game where you do have a lot of control over, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If I do go second turn one, I'll use my plan as a reference, but I won't be like beholden to it.
Yeah.
Just because you have the freedom at that point to react to what the other guy's doing. But
Yeah. And so, what are you looking for in deployment? I've talked about before looking for like honeypots and things like that, setting up to overlook objectives. Is there anything else that you're looking for?
in like TAO specifically, or just in general?
In general, but yeah, if there was something that came to mind about TAO, that would be fine to talk about too.
Yeah. Uh, so yeah. Essentially, you're looking for areas where guys that you need to be safe are like absolutely safe. If it's open board, you need to account for reserve tactics and make sure any of that's screened out. And then you just want to make sure that all of your output is like pointed in a useful direction. Um, a lot of TAO with like the really open boards came down to just really establishing overlapping fields of fire
Hmm.
and areas that I couldn't zone out that were close to my side of the board. I needed to have like a few guns pointed at that. So like maybe there is a spot in my deployment zone where he could drop someone, but there's a flamer and like two readied hot shots pointing at it or something, right?
Okay. Yep, makes sense.
um, so some of the stuff that I was prepping, like I think in one of my games, I think it was against Manko, I had to like advance a hot shot turn one to get him where I needed him, and then use my order for that turn to allow him to still fire. And then I had some cool stuff planned in some of the diagonal deployments that we could have hit in the finals.
Hmm.
I was gonna use, I think it's called reconnaissance sweep, something like that for the Scions, where they pretty much get
Oh,
to make like a 2d6 vet move.
it's kind of like it's like a vet move,
Yeah,
kind of for only for a Scion. Yep.
yeah, exactly. So I on some of those like diagonal deployments where you really there can be big blind spots behind the shipping containers on those ones
Hmm.
that are close enough to objectives to create like big problems for me where like if I want it's like an objective that should be on my side of the board that I really need to have, but if I don't have a, a gun overlooking it, it's like easy blind charges for him turn two.
Hmm.
um and like even a flamer didn't have the movement to get there consistently with an advance. So yeah, on some of those deployments, I was gonna just spend the point, run a gun over like my heavy hot shot over there, and if I rolled high enough, I could ready him up. If I didn't roll high enough, he would just have to walk the rest of the way. But just kind of figuring stuff like that out, I think, is very important.
Do you think that what you're doing through all of that is dictating the tempo of the game and like how things are going? Because you're kind of like you're saying you're practicing to go first and things like that. Do you feel that what you're doing is kind of like uh, creating the future or like saying to your opponent what their
Yeah,
options are?
yeah, exactly. Against all these Drukhari players, I was really trying to just give them a bunch of bad choices. It's like you can do a suicide drop into my zone. You're welcome to it.
Hmm.
You can stand out in the open on your own side on your objectives and get shot. You can stay in cover, but you're not going to score points. You can go to the middle, but you have to fight Gottfried. You can stay on the edge of the board, but Rouse is going to chuck a grenade at you. Just give them
Yes.
like a lot of bad choices, and then start adapting to what they do. And it's like, yeah, you want an 8.1-inch charge on that flamer next round. Like he's moved out of there now, so that's not even on the table for you anymore. Stuff like that.
Yeah. And that's something I was hoping to talk about a little bit later is like the action economy of guard and how you kind of, moved into really using the moves that weren't necessarily in that phase, like in the movement phase. You're still able to move and stuff as guard. So we'll circle back
Yeah,
to that because I think that that's really interesting and was a big thing for made
right.
you feel really slippery to prep against in TAO format. So really
Yeah.
quickly, we're talking about like giving people bad choices and screening things like that. You have some of the best use of flamers that I've seen. Can you kind of unpack that a little bit? What is the flamer to you that perhaps is different to like how maybe somebody else would run it and stuff? Because you do it your own way. And so what are you looking at there? Like what is that philosophy?
Um. Yeah. So I'm always, if I'm taking a flamer in a match chat, I'm going to assume that I'm never going to get a shot off with it. If I do, that's great, but that's not what I'm relying on it for. Because if I go first every turn, that's just not going to happen. Like no one's gonna put a vulnerable target in flamer range on purpose, right?
Absolutely.
So I start from there. If I'm even gonna bring a flamer or not, it's like, is this guy still worth it if he never gets to shoot? Um, so I use him as mostly like an area denial thing. I'll point him in an objective and just say, yeah, if you want that objective, take it. But I'm gonna punish you for it, right?
Hmm.
Um, it can make, like, obviously it's a big charge deterrent. It can really push enemy models back. In arena, there's lots of cool stuff you can do. Like if you put them close enough to a corridor, you can leave enough space that your own guys can charge through. But if the enemy wants to charge through, he has to charge the flamer as well.
Yeah. Because
So there's lots of cool like tricks you can do with them like that.
yeah, so like if somebody's listening, they don't quite understand what that is. So just legally, rules as written, you cannot move to within 1 inch of an enemy model unless you declared them as part of a charge. So through like terrain and positioning and things like that, you can get it to where they have to charge the flamer to get to the actual guy or position that they want to be in. And that's what you're talking
Yeah,
about, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Because there's some times where you
Um,
absolutely have to charge a flamer,
and
you know, and it sucks.
right,
Yeah.
and I think the last thing that I really love, or I think the last thing that maybe I do differently with flamers than a lot of people. First of all, I love cheap flamer models. Like on guardsmen, like cultists, like those are my favorite flamers. Um, I think that gun is just like worth more points on them than another model because it compensates for their poor ballistic skill, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then, but I'm also, because I'm not counting on them getting shots, I'm very willing to just use them as a body. Like, uh, I think I countercharge with my flamer troops a lot more than other people.
Okay.
I'll kind of like use the flamer to get them in like an aggressive position, and then I'm like perfectly happy to like set up a blind charge on an important gunner with my flamer for the next turn, and then just kind of do that tie up rather than use him for his gun himself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because a lot of times they're trying to set up a blind charge on you to get in on that flamer without taking Overwatch, and you can kind of be like, okay, big scary melee guy, even if it's not a gun, you can be like, okay, you're gonna kill some stuff.
Yeah,
Well, I'd rather it be this single 8 point guy than my leader, the comm spec, and my sniper, or something like that.
yeah, exactly.
You're again dictating the pace. You are creating the future by by this situation. So you set up to where they had to move to a position for a blind charge. Well, that also gives your flamer a blind charge against them, where you would now be able
Right.
to come in and hold them. Or maybe, if they're moving into a position to maybe ready and set up a threat, it's kind of like, well, you know, uh, my guy, if you're going to get to shoot stuff or whatever, like your Overwatch isn't as good as my flamer's Overwatch. So it's easier for you to charge them as a gunner versus gunner situation to hold them and
Yeah,
deny shots than it is for them to charge you.
yeah, and I think just because of the range that flamers like operate at, you're always being pretty aggressive with those guys. So they often find themselves in those positions where they are in charge range, and like one thing I would do often with my heretics is like, okay, so I go turn one, maybe I'm going first turn one. So I'll move my flamer up to protect like a spot where I want to stand a berserker. They might move a scary melee threat in response, like out of line of sight of the flamer, hoping to, at least contest the berserker the next turn. And so turn two comes around. Quite often I'll just take that blind charge with the flamer onto the scary melee guy, and then just run past with the berserker to get to like a softer target. Because that's really what you want to do with the berserkers. It's just like kill the squishy guys.
Yeah, it's dirty too.
So yeah. So I always remember it is a cultist or a guardsman with a flamer, but they're still a cultist or a guardsman, right? You're not that many more points for the gun, and so I try not to like force the flamer to be effective. Like I try not to force it to get its shots off. Just area denial and then use it as a body.
Yeah.
If you get shots off, it's a bonus.
Would you agree that like my kind of assessment of your play with the flamers is that you are a board control kind of a player. You are trying to deny areas. You're playing positionally with them, and opening up and closing down options, basically. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay, so earlier you mentioned screening. Let's imagine somebody has no idea what you're talking about here. How does somebody screen from reserves? Because reserves are a big bad with some of the boards that we've been playing on lately, and it's something that like people might not be aware of how big it is if they've been playing in a different meta for a little bit, haven't come on and played these recent packs. It's like it's a mandatory factor now on these open boards. And can you talk about what you're doing defensively against that?
Sure. So there's kind of two different styles of reserves, or I guess there's three styles of reserves that you've got to look out for. They can just walk their own guys into their own deployment zones for free on their own board edge. People like to do this with like a big heavy gun and just make sure that they get to line up a shot after the movement's all sorted out. There's not much you can do about that. I guess the one thing you can do on a board that says open as TAO is if you have your deployment set up so that your own shooting is exactly where you want it, you can ready and know that if they are kind of paying, that's the one thing that they sacrifice by going into reserve, is that they can't ready their own model. So they can come on at the end of movement and like line their own shots up, but you still get to shoot first. Right. The second style of reserve play is like outflank models. So these models can only come in within 1 inch of any board edge that's also 5 inches away from your opponent. So screening this out of your own side of the board is pretty important. Models that like to do this are usually like either they have a good gun and they're hoping to get like a really cheeky kill on you turn one, or they've got some kind of objective tied into it where they want to drop it into your deployment zone and start scoring points right away. So the way you prevent that is just simply making sure that you have guys within 5 inches of all spots on the board edge on your part of the board. They just can't drop there. Yeah. The other thing you can do, maybe you have lower model counts. So if you're playing an elite team and the enemy is doing this, you can just put good shooting along the board edges. Most of these open boards don't have a lot of cover on the board edge. So if you have your own shooting, looking down the board edges, knowing that they're going to look for an outflank, it becomes like a very dangerous proposition for them, even if you don't have the model count to fully screen them out.
So this is something that's basically done in deployment then? Yeah?
Yeah, ideally deployment, because then, like we talked about with that first scenario, is you can also ready. Mm-hmm. Depending on the deployment zones, if you can't, like for example, if it's a shield drone kind of style, where maybe they just want to drop some, like a hardy unit in, then the readying doesn't matter as much. So it's like quite simple. You can move a model to the board edge if you need to
Yeah.
have like a line of sight there. The last style of reserve play that you got to watch out for. Lots of factions have this where they can deep strike 3 of one type of a model anywhere on the board as long as it's 5 inches away from your deployment. This is what we saw a lot of in TAO with like Mandrakes. Great models that you can just plop all over the board. They get to shoot turn 1, and then turn 2 they're charging you and like causing havoc in your back line.
Yeah.
It's the hardest style to deal with because they can literally be anywhere.
Yeah.
So first of all, if you're really hoping to like successfully screen them out, you need a fair amount of models for that. Like, it's something that if you're running an elite team, you probably can't realistically do. You're just gonna have to accept that they're gonna get into some good spots, and you're hoping that your own models are going to be cost effective enough to deal with that. If it's something that you really think is going to be brought against you and you have the flexibility in what you're running, up your model count. Most of my lists that I was running for TAO were 9 models. Against Drukhari, I was running 10 just because that extra guy was like, just in most of the deployments, I found I needed literally one more body to stop him from being where he wanted to be.
And that was important because there's, like you were saying, these are guys who can shoot, and they can do melee on the same guy, and next turn they're re-rolling charges. So, it was really important. They were just going to come in 5 inches away or something and put a lot of shots into something you didn't want to get shot.
Yeah, exactly. And more importantly, I don't have many melee models, so once he starts piling into my guys, I start not having targets to shoot at. I've got gunners that aren't shooting. Like, it just becomes like a big avalanche of my models starting to become useless. So you need a big team to green them out with bodies. And then with guard, I was lucky where I had enough shooting options to also have like a further beyond that 5-inch bubble. I had quite a bit of distance where even if he was technically able to put a model there, it was very dangerous for him too. Because I'm running the 4-shot hot-shot volley guns and flamers, and the board allowed me to create overlapping fields of fire where even if he could legally put models in certain spots, he was looking at getting shot by 2 or 3 different models if he did.
Yeah. Rough. Yeah, man. Okay, so your games, the final thing, I think it was, we started, because I had played the finals for the Fight Club at like 9:30 in the morning, and then I think we started at 11:30, and the games, the best of 3 went till 4:30 in the afternoon. Like, how do you deal with that? Like, how do you have that stamina as a player? Like, is there any thoughts on that? Like, how do you survive those kinds of games? Like, because top table games, like, there's talk about going to chess clocks, but usually the top table games, will just run. Like, they go to the conclusion at a GT or a major. RTT, it's still usually bound by time because it's like a physical game store that's going to close. But like Las Vegas Open or something, they're going to have you play until the game is resolved. So especially now that we've gone to like best of 3 format, like, how do you survive that?
Yeah, it's I think I'm not gonna lie, I was feeling kind of sloppy by the end there. I think being used to playing a lot helps. If somebody really wanted to prep for like a best of 3 finals, I think the best way to do it would be to play best of 3s, in your practice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Just make sure you got a snack and some water, and it's hard. It can be. It's really draining.
How do you feel about the move to chess clocks? Like, what is your opinion in general on that?
I don't mind it. Um, I know I was a little vocal when it started, when it first got brought up, just because I thought it was a little too soon to bring them out. Like, I think we still don't have a FAQ out for them. Am I correct?
I don't believe so. You're talking
Yeah,
about for the ELO?
yeah. For the
Yeah.
yeah, I guess
No,
for
I don't.
people who aren't on the Discord, the Discord that we play all these games on has just announced that if one player in a ranked game requests a chess clock, it's going to be mandatory.
Yeah, I think that like
Um,
what I've been pushing for there is that it's not even a request; that it's just on the table.
it's just there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that that's the way to do it. Otherwise, it's like a gotcha. You can be like,
yeah,
"Hey, how do you feel about a clock?" And if they're like gung ho, they're like, "Nah,
yeah,
never mind." And
exactly.
if they're like, "Oh, I don't know," it's like an advantage gotcha play or something. You'd be like, "You know what? Chess clock, boom," and then you're clubbing baby seals. So I think that it's better to
Yeah,
have it out, like, because I think it's like a weird thing. Playing in person, there's always time limits, except for like that
right.
final game, like I was talking about. But usually, what I found happens is I get burned every time it goes to time. Like,
Yeah, I think in theory, I really like the chess clock. I think it need, I think it needed just a little more fine tuning before it became mandatory.
hmm
Just because, for example, right now, I don't think anybody knows what happens if time runs out on the chess clock,
yeah,
right?
yeah, and that's
Like,
supposed to.
we need something some simple guidelines first.
Yeah, I think it was
Um,
just going to be using like kind of what they do with ITC. Like, okay, when your time's done, you're just kind of like done. You have to still attack if you're within 1 inch. So you'd roll dice there. You have to take your saves, but like movement and things like that, I think is just done.
so you pretty much just don't get a movement say
Yeah,
phase.
for like that last round or whatever it happens to be. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
like
that's how
I'm
they do it.
perfectly fine with it. Like I've played a few games now with them.
Yeah,
Um, I I haven't hit the time limit. Like it's a pretty reasonable time limit that they have on it.
yeah.
Um,
No, I just don't like the idea for me is I don't want it to go back to a 70-30 split. You know what I mean? Like, okay, here's a 90-minute
yeah,
round. This guy gets 70 minutes of that, and Biernid, you get 30. And when the dice down gets called, it's going to burn you over that, not the other
yeah,
guy, for eating the entire amount of time and stuff and putting you to rush and not play at your best. It's like I at least, if there's going to be time limits, I want a timer for the movement phase that each person has individual, or the chess clock or something. Like once timing is
right.
brought up, I just feel like we need to ensure that it's equal. You know?
Yeah. Um, I think there's definitely a way to do it well. Um, I wonder. We've just got to sort some things out because I think, in my opinion, a lot of Kill Team is like discussion in a
Mm-hmm.
way. Like if I'm placing a model that has, I want it to be outside of like this distance from, like, I want it to be at 8.1 of a flamer, obscured from this guy, line of sight on this guy, right? A lot of that is a discussion that I'm having with you that relies on your confirmation, right? And
Absolutely.
so a lot of it's going to be like, I think, well, I've got line of sight like on this guy. You agree with me, right? And sometimes if your opponent's kind of slow playing their responses or just being difficult with the responses, like this doesn't happen often,
Yeah.
but I assume that would still be coming out of your time, right? Because it's your movement.
I think if it's like any rules dispute, it's supposed to be a pause.
Yeah,
I don't know
but
if
it's
that
just
would count as a
it's
dispute.
not even a rules dispute though. It's just
Yeah.
like some, I don't know. I think there's a way to make it work. And I think most of the time, even with very, very simple FAQ things, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
But I just wonder about stuff like that when if you're up against a player who's just kind of not giving you anything back.
Yeah.
I just hope they have a system in place for that.
Yeah. There's like it's gonna be there's gonna be some like feeling it out, right? Like that's how
Yeah,
I feel about
exactly.
it. Because like I said, the biggest thing for me is that if it goes to having time, I don't want it to be an even split. For
Yeah,
example, I played a game in Spain last month that took 4 hours. My first game with a chess clock on TTS through the disco, I had done all 4 rounds on my side in 18 minutes. And it was like, holy crap, why are these taking 4 hours? And it just brought back like this old pain. Like I'm not going to name names. I'm not even going to name the event. I had an event where I paid money to go out there. I drove the TO there. Like all this stuff. This is out of town. This is a major. And I get there, and turn 2 on the second day, or game 2 of the second day, I get matched up against basically a mirror match of 20 models versus my 20 models. And what they did is they advanced up everything. They won initiative turn 1 and moved everything up to be like 1.1 inches away from my guys, because they had that crazy movement of the faction that they happened to be playing. And they basically shut down after that. So I was able to get through by charging models through to the other side, you know what I mean? Like, because they put a model in the center, a model on their 2 back objectives, and then rushed everything up in front of my objectives. So I had to like charge to get through to be on the other side of them now, where charged model passed. And it was very like duking it out and stuff. And I do think that that's a valid tactic. But what happened is the opponent just stopped. The opponent started commenting about my paint job. The opponent started hemming and hawing. Would not. I didn't get a turn 2. And so again, just imagine this is something that you paid a lot of money to attend, that you had to drive to, that you got the TO there for, and dice down gets called. You know what I mean? Like I got so burned off of that, and it was like I was kind of agnostic when they were talking about chess clocks and timing again, and then the more that I thought about it, it was just like, dude, I will never willingly play an even just like a Wild West. Okay, it's a 90-minute round. Use it as you will, like undivided ever again if I can help it, because like every time I have been burned on that. Like, okay, dice down. It's like, geez Louise, I had I can finish a game in 18 minutes. How is it in 90 minutes I'm not getting my round 4? That is not right.
Yeah, I think if we are going to time games, I think chess clocks is definitely a more fair way to do it.
Yeah,
than just a time limit.
Or like I was saying, maybe a timer for the movement phase on either side, something that is just divided so that we can actually look. Because right now, if you go to a GT, like if COVID stopped tomorrow, LVO went on, and I went there and it was a 90-minute round, and I said, hey, I got a problem with this opponent, there's no confirmation. There's no verifiable data for the TO to come over and see like what is going on there. So even just tracking the time, even if it wasn't like a dice down for the other guy when it's over, you'd have the verifiable data to be like, hey, I didn't get my time to play this game. And they'd be able to see the numbers and be like, oh yeah, there's a problem if this guy got an hour and this guy got a half hour. And I understand that there's going to be like horde teams are going to move faster than I will or slower than I will with my Death Watch, right? So there's going to be some things there. But yeah, I don't know. I was just wondering how you felt about it in general.
Yeah, I'm pretty okay with it. I would just encourage people, like, if it looks like this is going to become a thing, practice with them a lot so that it doesn't throw you off if you are using one.
Yeah.
And like be kind to your opponent. Like we don't want to see a higher barrier of entry to kill team. And so if you're playing with someone new, maybe just say like, lots of people are using chess clocks. Let's like pass it back and forth so that you get used to the timer, like hitting the timer button on it.
Yeah.
But don't worry about it if it goes over, just because like they have enough on their plate.
Yeah, especially in prep, right?
Yeah.
Like if it's not going to count for anything, it's a learning game. It probably doesn't need to be super like like
we can just like help everybody get to a place where using them is pretty comfortable.
All right.
I kind of like the idea. Like I think last time I was on, we were talking a bit about StarCraft. So like, yeah, I'm an RTS player at heart. So if people want to play fast, I'll play fast.
Yeah. No. So getting back to like the unpeeling the onion there, do you think that StarCraft or playing any other games before this has helped you to play Big 40K?
Kill Team?
Or yeah, Kill Team.
No.
Yeah, because I was going to ask if you played Big 40K, so it was on my mind. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I've always had a mind for strategy games, and I think in general there's a lot of cross-pollination between the different games I play and have played.
Like
I think just getting your mind into that strategic mind space, like whether it's chess, checkers, StarCraft, like any kind of game where you're in that kind of mind space, there's going to be ideas that go back and forth.
Can you think of something like specifically? Because I was trying to think of it. Like, what is it from like maybe StarCraft that would carry over and help somebody in Big 40K, for example? I mean, not Big 40K. Again, Kill Team.
Yeah.
What game do I play again?
The biggest I think is just having like a game plan and knowing how to execute it. Like one thing I always do is I picture like what does a game look like where I win? Like what does that game look like? For like this TAO, that game looked against Drukhari, that looked like me sitting way back, pushing Gottfried forward into the center. I wanted him to be shot at no game, like all game long, and never get a charge off on me. Like that's how I picture that game going. With my heretics, I want berserkers everywhere, and then collapsing in on my opponent all at once. I want his like important units tied down by cultists, while my berserkers kind of tear through his back line. And then just figuring out how to execute that and like point everything in that direction. Like I think you're going to have very similar parallels between a lot of strategy games in that. It's like know what your win condition is, what that game looks like, and then how to get your pieces into the spots they need to be to accomplish it. There's like in StarCraft, like a standard game plan might be like I want to have like a pinning force that he's keeping him occupied the whole game long. I want to keep him on his side of the map while I outgrow him on my own side until I have too much of a lead for him to contest with. And so you could execute a very similar game plan with in Kill Team pretty successfully. You'd be like, I have these harassing units. They're going to be on his objectives, and by the time he's done dealing with them, it's going to be turn 4, and he's never made it over to my side of the map, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a trip. Like there are parallels. You know, like once you get into gaming, like because I was never really like a big gamer before getting into Kill Team, and it's funny because in September I read this thing about how Magic the Gathering was like the most difficult game, and I was talking to Tim and stuff, and I believe about like esports and things like that, and
Yeah.
I decided to give it a try, and it was like, dude, so much translated over. Like what did I do?
Yeah.
First thing, look at the win condition. How do I win this game? Okay, I reduce from 20 down to 0. Like that's so much more simple than like, okay, you need to hold one. Well, you need to hold more than the opponent. Okay, but you also need a kill, and then you have your secondary objective. It was like, dude, we were asking for 7 things from an opponent minimum, or from a player. That this game was just like, no, you just reduce it. You start at 20, you get them to 0 before you do. It's like, whoa, this is more like blackjack than anything. And then it was like,
Yeah.
okay, you take all that time roster building for for Kill Team, and it's like, dude, okay, pretty soon you're like, I don't know, I got to Mythic, which is the highest you can rank in less than a month. My first month
Great.
playing the game, I had never played before. Like I've had people try to teach me, and it was just like, what? With the paper thing. But coming in after time in Kill Team, it was like, dude, this ladder is nothing. Just like everybody else is like, oh, this is my thing that I think will win the game. And it's like, nope, does not point at the win condition. Boom, just hammering them. So yeah, it's a trip how many parallels there are between games that wouldn't even seem related.
Yeah, I've never played Magic. I've played some Hearthstone, and like I obviously like I think Hearthstone's more RNG, but they're just between like deck building games and like the roster and mustering of Kill Team.
Mm-hmm.
There's like so much parallel there, right?
Yeah.
Like that's pretty much what your roster and muster is it's a deck building part of this game that we play, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, any experience you have in those areas are going to translate pretty well.
So really quickly, I don't know if you want to spend a whole bunch of time on it, but can you give any tips as far as managing CP is concerned? Just for somebody who's listening, you're a really good player, you're getting top 8s and tourney wins and stuff. What do you think of there? Like what comes to mind when you hear CP management?
Yeah. It's not an easy question. Uh, I think it kind of goes back to that game plan that I was kind of like a similar thing to how we were just talking about with StarCraft. Like you need to have a game plan going in, and need to know what your win conditions are. Um, it like say you're playing against like Thousand Suns, right? They've got those two sorcerers, and most of the time those sorcerers need to go down, right? Like those are the single kind of most impactful models on the board for either team, probably.
Hmm.
um, and so in a matchup like that, like you're really going to be wanting to point CP at those targets. Um, depend like there's just no easy answer to it though. Like depending on what kind of team you're playing, you need to know whether you want to be using it for movement purposes, defensive purposes, or offensive. I guess you could kind of split it into those three categories.
Yeah.
And depending on your game plan, you probably want to pick one of those and then dedicate a certain amount of your CP for that. And then and then everybody uses tactical reroll, right? It's like sometimes you just need something to go through, and so that's there.
Yeah.
But knowing what your win conditions are, like, do I need to kill or do I need to survive? That lets you know whether you need to save that CP for like a wound reroll or an armor save. Um, I think the best thing that will help you with your CP usage is just having a really clear game plan from the start. Like, know what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and decide whether you really want to push one of those with CP or if you want to compensate on one of your weaknesses.
Yeah, it's like really interesting because it is a hard choice, right? Like I've been playing a lot of Tau lately, and I regularly find myself in a situation where it's like, okay, maybe I have a shield drone who's on a point and needs to reroll a save, right?
Yeah,
But there's this enemy model who next turn is going to be causing me significant problems. So, there's part of me that wants to use that to pump my rail to get this guy taken out. And
yeah,
it's like, which one should I do? You know, there's one that's scoring me a point now. If I can make this guy survive, but then it's like, okay, there's compensation for the opponent next turn because if I just save this little shield drone and take that point and run, uh, then here's this big scary model who's going to continue to cause a lot of problems for me throughout the rest of the game, basically.
right.
So it's like, hmm, it's an interesting thing. It's like the payoff reward kind of now or later kind of a thing. Like, it's a really interesting thing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to. There's no easy answer on it, right? And I think that's what part of what makes this game so interesting is you have to pick between hard choices, right?
Yeah.
And the good players do it well. The bad players learn to do it better.
Yeah. And then if you're me, you roll that 4-up save into another one and
Oh yeah,
fail that anyway. And then you don't kill that model. That's going to be a problem. It's like, I
yeah,
didn't do either one. One of those needed to happen right now. Neither happened.
yeah. I don't know if there's anything quite as infuriating as like some of these tack rerolls that should work but just don't.
Yeah, what's the fastest way to roll a 6 or the easiest way to roll a 6? It's like as a reroll from a 6. Or same with
Yeah,
1, right? How do you roll a 1 every time? Pay a CP right after rolling a 1. You'll hit it, trust me. It's like I
yeah,
can't
for
tell you
sure.
how many 1s I've turned into 1s, or like, okay, here's on to a Necron. I don't need a 6. Oh, there's a 6. Okay, CP reroll, and it's another 6. Oh, the entire game has now just shifted. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's pretty crazy. Okay.
I maybe one thing that I was just thinking about. There's a tactic that lots of people like that I just never use. It's the sniper specific tactic.
Oh, the +1 to hit.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever used that once
Oh, it's so
since I
good.
started playing TTS.
Oh, so
I
good, man.
I don't like it.
So
It's
good.
like anytime I've used it, well, I don't even use it. It's just like I know that if I use it, I'm gonna like fail the wound roll. I'll roll a 1 on it, and then I won't
Yeah.
have the CP to re-roll that.
Yeah.
I would way rather just save my CP to for attack reroll on that shot that I really need to count than to pay 1 ahead of time for maybe a hit.
Yeah. It's hard because sometimes you look at the classic shield drone spam list. You'll have 2 rails, and that's the only offense that you have for your entire team.
Yeah.
It's scary to not pump it.
Yeah. The math is pretty good on them though, right?
Yeah, it would be a 4 base. You're getting to a 3 with that and a 2 with the comms, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I was a Tau player, in general, I would probably be spending my CP. I would you've got the recon drone into one of your pathies. I would probably pay a CP for the recon sweep. Is that the right word?
Oh, the one to ignore the obscurity?
On the other guy?
Yeah.
And I would, rather than pumping the sniper's hit, I would just re-roll a fail on something instead.
All right, I'll try it.
Look at the math on it. He'll be hitting on 4s, right? As is. 3s with the comms. So you've got really low chances that both of those miss, right?
Mm-hmm.
But say you get 1 hit, he still might not be. You'll still need a reroll for the wound because he won't wound on a 1 or a 2, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you get unlucky and miss one of those shots or both of those shots, you can still attack reroll one of those misses, and that's going to give you probably better odds of landing a hit than the +1 in general. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I've always thought that if you're going to CP reroll, it's probably better to do a wound than a hit roll, right?
If you have the option.
Yeah, if you have had a hit. Yeah. It's you get 2 shots, 1 hits, 1 misses. It's do you reroll that hit? It's probably better to save that in case you miss the wound, because then you've already bypassed a big gate, Yeah.
The only exception would be I don't know, if you need something dead and maybe it has 2 wounds and you've got a 1 damage weapon and you need the 2 hits.
Yeah.
Or they've got a really good save and you just don't have any other choice. You're I need to put 2 or 3 successful hits into this guy. Otherwise he's just gonna re-roll his 1 fail.
Yeah. It's interesting because you're getting kind of into range, and I've seen, you've done top 8 with melee, you've just won with a ranged build. Is 1 better? Do you think range is stronger than melee, or is melee stronger than ranged?
On TAO, range is stronger.
Do you think that's the packet?
It's completely packet dependent. I don't think a ranged team could have won bats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I shouldn't say it couldn't have. It would be an uphill battle.
Yeah, it would have been harder than maybe something else more melee centric.
I mean, yeah, I guess there's always going to be a sliding scale on terrain, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, on one side, you could build a board where a ranged team would never get a single shot, right? Yeah, and you could build a board where a melee team never gets to hide. So it's just going to depend where on that spectrum the board ends up being.
Yeah.
Which is stronger.
I think you and Shane both had some ranged in your very melee builds for bats as well. There was some, it did lean one way.
Yeah, I really like teams like that. That's something fun or kind of neat we could talk about. I think that a team that's mostly melee with a little bit of ranged is stronger in melee than an all melee team. If that makes sense.
Can you say that another way, in case?
Yeah, and the other way around. A shooting team with a few melee models is so much stronger, in my opinion, than a full shooting team. Just because it you can use those models to like cover your other models' weaknesses, right?
Yeah.
Like if I was playing, say, all berserkers, right?
Hmm.
I didn't bring my sniper and I didn't bring my flamers. Like I have nothing to cover for those guys. Like there's nothing to stop a plasma gun from just like advancing around a corner and shooting me in the face at point blank range.
Right.
You need to have those like threats set up to counter that, right? And so when I'm playing a melee team, that's what my shooters' jobs are. I want at least a few shooting models on there to threaten the areas that are going to threaten my melee guys. If I'm playing a shooting team, I really want them to have to think twice about just advancing as far up the field as they can and just running straight into me. Like, think about how much weaker guard is without Gottfried, right?
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like having that model that they're scared of in melee helps my shooters be so much more effective because it ensures their output for longer.
Yeah, because if they just veteran move up and get in turn one, you're kind of like, oh, okay, and you just take your better melee model than whatever
Yeah,
veteran they have probably, and just
even
stuff
if
them
it's
in
not
there.
Gottfried, like if it's say it's a Tempester with like fixed bayonets, right?
Yeah, oh, the power fist. Yeah, fix bayonets to fight first before anybody
Yeah,
else.
like that model fits so well into guard
Hmm.
because there's so many things that the other team wants to do to punish you for being a shooting team that model can shut down. And even if the math isn't great on him, like he's only got 2 attacks, um, hitting on 4s, right?
Hmm.
It's not too hard for him to whiff, but they have to be scared of him because if he does hit, stuff's going to go down, right?
Yeah.
And so just them having to play around your off tilt models, like if you've got that melee tilt, them playing around their shooting models is going to make your melee stronger.
And so like contrast. That's it's an interesting thing because it's like you've put a lot of emphasis on the hot shot volley gun, but also got for it for your win. And then here we are. We're talking about this kind of combined arms approach. It's interesting to
Yeah,
kind of see that come full circle now. Yeah.
yeah, and I think most of my games, like, or sorry, not most of my games, most of my matchups, I did have more melee in it than just Gottfried.
Hmm.
Um, like the core list that I start with guard has both Gottfried, the Tempester, and the Sergeant on it,
Hmm. And you're
and
running Catachan to give them even more there.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, and sometimes I would be running Pious, right, and so it was only against Drukhari where I figured I really dialed back the melee because once they start getting in on stuff, they're just too scary. Like, first of all, the Tempester isn't great against them because they're already -1 to hit. Um, and just giving them any bastion where they can kind of like hide from shooting in melee is so dangerous in that matchup.
Yeah.
But yeah, like most of my other matchups, I probably had at least 2, probably 3 melee models.
Hmm. Which is interesting because it's like you're devoting an entire sub faction to that, and it's like okay, you'll have 11 guys, but only 3 are benefiting realistically, but it was enough, and it's an interesting thing because there's this, um, like what is it, a Shakespearean kind of a question you could get into philosophically in Kill Team about your sub faction. Do you use your sub faction to buff a deficiency in your list, or do you use that to get gooder, quote unquote, at what you're already doing? And I see both being used, and I wonder if one is, superior in all cases. If there's some that, it's going to just be case dependent, depending on what that brings to the faction. What do you think?
Yeah, I think like a lot of these questions is there's no easy answer, which is what makes the game so great, right?
Yeah.
Um, like for TAO, my first instinct was to go to Lauren with it,
Hmm.
just because the board was just yelling shooting so much, right?
Yeah.
I tried a game or two with it, and then I just realized, like, you know what? There's this board is so good for shooting. I don't even need to move much to get my shots.
Right. So you're not
Right?
advancing. It would be like, okay, you give yourself a sub faction to get better at what you're already doing, but then it's like you didn't even need to do the movement.
I did, yeah, exactly. And so I was like, you know what? Buffing my models that are going to be there for me in case things go wrong is going to be better in this case than being better at what I'm already good at, which on this board is already amazing.
Yeah.
Right. I think another interesting one could have been I think Cadia. I think it's like re-rolling ones to hit if you didn't move,
Mm-hmm.
which 90% of the time is going to be useless.
Yeah.
On most, but on this board, that would be good.
That's the exact thing I was just gonna say. Yep. Like this is the case for Cadia. Like TAO would have been the time.
Yeah. So I think you could have made an argument for that. And also just knowing if I had known I was playing so much Drukhari against so much, there's a chance you could maybe go, I think it's Vostroyan, the ignore long range penalties.
Mm-hmm.
Just because then you're never hitting those mandrakes on 6s. You're at least hitting them on 5s.
Yeah, if somebody's not familiar, they're just stuffing a lot of debuffs onto you. Like they'll be, long range, they'll be in cover, and mandrakes have that built-in -1, and they have an ability to make them an additional -1, so you can be -4 to hit against a mandrake, quite possibly. Which is
Strength 4 Gottfried is so nice though. So I don't know.
Yeah, Strength 4 Gottfried.
But yeah.
One other thing that the guard brought that I noticed that you took advantage of quite a bit, and I was hoping to talk a little bit about, is action economy. Can you talk a little bit on the importance of that? Like moving in the shooting phase is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
We kind of touched on this a little bit. You were often doing that 3 times a turn. So like, what were your goals? We're just kind of like looking for the beardy cheese here. Why is that strong?
Right. Well, if we look at it, like it's strong for the same reason that reserves are strong. It's because you get to move after everybody else has already moved, and you know what the board state is. There's very little your opponent can do at that point to counterplay you. So if people don't know my list, these 3 extra moves that I'm getting are from Ryan and Rouse, who each have what do you guys call it? Shoot, scoot, and boogie?
Shoot, scoot, and boogie, yeah.
AKA
shoot, sharp, and scarper, as it's actually called.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they get to make a move as if it was the movement phase, except they can't advance after they fire a weapon in the shooting phase. There's some interesting stuff in that. It's not just the normal move you can do. You can also charge or fall back. So if you say you're in close combat round 2, you can like fire your pistol and then fall back before they get a chance to actually punch you.
Yep.
And then the third move that I'm making is with my order move, which lets a model make an advance. You have to be within 12 inches of your leader for them to be targeted with an order, and then they get to make an advance instead of shooting that round. So it lets you, for example, like you can have Ryan and Rouse be in cover, getting their bonus from naturally stealthy, so they take an extra -1 to hit when they're in cover. Mm-hmm. You can delay their shot until the other team's exhausted their shooting, shoot from safety, and then stand out on one of these objectives that's in the open, and still score it and be perfectly safe. I think that was one of the big challenges that this board presented, is you're in a hold 1, hold 2, hold 1, hold more format. But the objectives are all very open. So scoring is often a tricky proposition.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the big successes to guard on it is that you have Gottfried who can hold a point in the open and just not care if people are shooting him. And then you've got these orders and your two Rattling twins that can fire from safety and then score points after the shootings died down. And then I also move is just so strong. I think when a lot of people look at orders, the initial one that catches people's eye is fixed bayonets. Lets you fight in the shooting phase.
Back
which
when
is nice.
Gottfried could take that was discussed.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, that order is really nice on like your Tempester or your Sarge in certain matchups.
Mm-hmm.
But as I've got more guard under my belt, I really think move is the strongest order, close to being broken.
Yeah, no, it's really good. And other factions, there are other things in there. There's fire and fade for any of the elf factions and stuff, and even up and atom if you have a combat spec, depending on how the packet rules it. There are ways that, and that's something that every team just about has access to. Even Tau through like the Kroot. If you took a combat spec Kroot, you could have an up and atom thing if you wanted to, or something ridiculous, right?
Yeah, it's something that certain other teams are very happy to pay 1 CP for, to do it once a turn. And with this guard team, you get to do it 3 times a turn for free.
Yes.
It's
so good.
Like, people aren't grumpy about paying 1 CP to do that. Like, it is really good. And
no, it's like deceiving how good it is, because like, for example, up and atom, they think that that's just for fighting, but it's like, no, you can take a Lictor, put him in cover, complete and total cover. He's not able to be shot. Okay, shooting phase passes. You fight with something else somewhere far away on the board. Pop that 1 CP tactic, and he gets 3 inches of movement, head start on next round's charge. So he's now still moving up the board in a time where it's not, deadly to him, where he's now safe from the shooting. That phase has passed. Now we're moving closer towards the objective that we really want him to be on for next turn. It's very powerful. It's the action economy thing. And if you guys are listening, Shane from Command Point did a really good video on that. If you go to YouTube and type in Command Point and you search through their videos, I think it's just called Action Economy, but it's talking about like why Eldar Fire and Fade is so strong. And then so here you kind of took that to the next level, and you're like, okay, well, guard can do that 3 times, and they don't pay a CP for it.
And it's just so useful for getting the board state to a spot where you like it. Like, if they're pushing too hard on one flank, you can just get a guy out of there with it, right? Like, they got an easy 6-inch charge next turn onto like a vulnerable target. That guy's not even in that board quarter anymore.
Yeah.
Right? If you're playing against a shooting team, you can like move your sergeant into the middle of the board. They're going to line up shots on him, and then he's going to advance behind, like out of line of sight for like a perfect charge the follow-up turn, There's just so many different ways you can use it to just kind of like push and pull your units forward and back and just get the board state exactly where you want it. Like, you're not scoring one of your positionals this turn. Move. You're there.
Yep, you got your butt on that objective suddenly.
Shoot and boogie.
Yep. No, and it's like there's so much utility to it, because it's like, okay, it's just like this pocket knife, because now let's say you're on arena and there's doors.
Yeah.
It's not the same for Tau, but Tau, for example, have the recon sweep tactic, where they pay a CP and get to move 2d6 inches, and that now is basically 3 doors that single Pathfinder can open. That is really big, because if you're spamming drones can't open doors. So it's like you take that guy, you make him a veteran, he does a vet move, pops that door, normal move 7 inches, pops that door, and then a 2d6 inch normal move in the shooting phase to pop a third. Like, that one guy can do so much. So it's just as an overall, not only guard thing. If you can find action economy in your lists and keep that just available to you, it's a really interesting thing. Like you said, get onto a point. Or get, like, some things that I've seen done too is it's like people will, like, let's say that you as guard had initiative. You'll move into position and people set up to kill this model. You just run them somewhere else.
Yep.
And they're totally off position. Like, okay, that was 3 models that I dedicated towards this or something that now it's just gone. That's so big,
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah, the guard has like so many tools to do things like that. It's great. Like even beyond that, movement tools, like their tactics are really strong. I found in general for this tournament, I found myself using the defensive guard tactics a lot. Um, there's one get down, which is like if they take a shot that's on a model that has cover, you can give it a minus. Then all the models on their team get a -1 to hit that target for the rest of the phase.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is fight for your life. It'll give them -1 to an injury roll. So lots of the time that like because most teams can't bring the same amount of shooting that guard can, right?
Yeah.
So on this board, I'm really outgunning them on most of the time, and then the shots that they do have are going to have horrible modifiers on them. Like oftentimes they might be lining up both their gunners onto the same target just to kind of guarantee a kill. And then all of a sudden that guy is like -1 to hit. He's long range in cover. So they're only hitting him on 6s. And if they finally do get something through, you can pop get down and they need a 6 to kill him as well. Right?
Yeah, that's such feel bads,
Really,
dude.
yeah.
Yeah, holy crap.
It just washes like their output so hard. And it's just such a great tactic, especially those situations like you were talking about, where they really need something dead and they line up a lot of models to do it. Even if you can't move that guy out of there, you can oftentimes give them some really good buffs to survivability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, suddenly here's this little 8-point guardsman that's like more durable at the end of the day than like a death guard model or something.
Yeah, it feels like playing against like a Necron or something, right?
Yeah.
Like you need that. There's only one outcome on the injury roll die that will get you that kill, and at the same time he's a Mandrake because he's -1 to hit. Right?
Yeah.
It's nasty.
Yeah, so you kind of took what was strong on their side and you're like, okay, I kind of have that too.
Yeah.
On this model. Yeah, it's pretty neat. So I have this quiz that I give to any of my coaching clients, and one of the things that I thought would be interesting to ask you is one of the questions on there, just to kind of see where you lean. It says, how do you know you're winning the game? Out of actions, board control, scary plan, or early charges? Or like maybe a vet move? Or could it be points alone? Like I'm just looking at points. So is there anything there that specifically resonates with you? I didn't ask it word for word how I actually do, but I figured you would get the gist of it. How do you know you're winning, Micro? Like, what is it that lets you say, "Holy crap, I have this"?
I guess I would probably choose board control. Though I might change the wording a bit to board state.
That's how it is worded in the thing, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, that I think I'm a player that. It's funny. There was a question I think on the Command Point Discord, or it was in their mailbag for one of their podcasts, and people were asking, like, who the most positional players are in the scene, and I think it's kind of funny because when you get to a high level in this game, everybody's positional, right? Mm-hmm. That is what the game is. It's positional. When you get to a high level, you're not going to play against players that aren't good at like all those things that you just described. Mm-hmm. People just have different leanings. Like they're good at everything, but they're exceptional in this one area. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Shane is probably the best list builder in like the scene, I would say. But that doesn't mean that his like movement and his positioning is second rate, right?
Yeah.
Like if you had to describe him as a player, you might point to his list building, but he's still probably like at least top 5 in every single other category as well.
Yeah.
So as like a player, I think I have my tilt is towards board state. When I play, especially in the early game, I'm very happy to leave points off the scoreboard if it means I get to have models in the places where I want them and where they're going to be useful going forward.
What about me, Micro?
Yeah,
played.
like,
How do you describe it?
I would consider you a game plan player. Like, you come up with really, really strong game plans where you're going to kind of like, you know exactly what you want to be doing turn one, how you're going to get your lead, and then you're going to be trying to keep it as the game goes on, right?
Yeah.
And that does, like we were saying before with Shane, that doesn't mean your lists are bad. It doesn't mean your positioning's bad. You're very strong in both of those areas, but your tilt is towards that winning game plan. That's what you're always looking for.
My favorite thing in this game is to look at the scoreboard and see 7-1 turn one. Like just a 7-point turn one. It's just like that's what I want. Like every game.
That's so funny because like I'll be perfectly happy looking at the scoreboard turn one, and if I'm on the 1 point side of that.
Yeah, no, Shane has said similar to me before that he, like with his Astartes, he was very happy to be relaxed in the early game and then push in the later. And I was playing Astartes, the same packet, all this stuff, and was just like, nope, boom, it's trying to get that early alpha strike kind of a thing going. And
yeah, I've noticed a few times. I think my games in general, like I'll be behind or very close early on, and then by turn kind of 3 or 4, things have kind of avalanched my way enough that there's a big swing at the end of the game. And that's been true both for like my Heretics last tournament and Guard this side. I just keep pushing the board state, trying to get the most out of my models. And then even if it means like not standing on an objective, not scoring a secondary, turn 1 and 2, I'm very willing to do that. If it sets me up for a better move the next turn.
It's really interesting because Holy's that way. Like you'll see him in the early game and he's like down a point or two, and then by the end he's got like double digits over the other guy. Like what? I just looked away for a couple turns. Like what happened? The other guy had this.
Yeah, I've noticed that in like a lot of the. If I rewatch the commentary on one of my games, a lot of the times you'll hear the commentary saying like, I feel like this game is more one-sided than the points are saying. And I think it's for that reason. It's because I will leave points off the board to make the game look that one-sided.
Yeah.
It's a cause and effect thing there, I think. If I was scoring those points, it wouldn't look like that.
So what you're saying basically, you're not like maybe overexposing yourself or something like that, like giving up a strong position to eke out a quick point. Something to that effect.
Yeah, it's not even necessarily about playing conservative. It's playing with a plan separate from where the points are located.
Oh geez, I have a hard time with that.
So for example, I'm trying to think. I think in the finals when I was playing in game 1 against the Cobalite list. Mm-hmm. I had a flamer at one point, and I made a move with him that the casters were kind of confused about. I did like a move with him. He was in a safe spot. He had been overlooking an objective that he had already kind of denied them walking onto for that turn. And then I moved him out into danger where he was being shot by, I think, a basic Cobalite warrior. Mm-hmm. And instead of like moving him onto the objective that he had just denied, right?
Right.
And the casters were kind of screaming me at it for them. But he survived that round. And the next round, they were like, that guy made a blind charge onto the Darklands.
Okay. So it was an in-between move.
But they're connected, right?
Yes. Yep.
And so it's just playing a turn ahead with a plan in mind for that model. It doesn't always mean you're not taking risks with them.
Yeah.
Like I took him from a safe spot, put him in danger, but I just thought the risk was worth it to shut down that really scary element of shooting the following turn, right?
Yeah. No, man. I think that it's like I think that there's a difference coming in. Like we have a new generation of players that is really growing up in TTS, and I think that that is a difference because like for me, I like I was arguing about with the chess clocks earlier.
Yeah,
Um, Turn 3 is not guaranteed. Turn 4 is not guaranteed. You know what I mean? So it's like I will do things that a lot of people would consider caveman moves to eke out that extra point just out of habit because it's like I think ingrained in me at this point that it's like take the points while you can.
right.
That I think like hopefully if times are introduced and it's done with chess clocks, you're still allowed to do what you're talking about there
Yeah,
because you would still now have your time guaranteed. I think it brings us like full circle back to that, right? Like the importance of
yeah,
having your time because you are like the perfect example now, like of that. Like you are forming thoughts a turn ahead, and if you're
yeah.
not
I
able
really need
to,
that turn ahead to happen.
yeah,
If that turn doesn't happen,
yeah, it's like here's this beautiful thing you're creating. It's like the high, like some of the highest level play that you would see is like that planning that would be going into it, like 2 turns in the making to make that happen. Um, you don't want it to get robbed of that. So it's probably a good thing, you know. Probably a good thing to have those chess clocks.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. But no, I do think that there is a difference now. People are so clean, all this stuff, you know, deliberate movements. You got that toe and cover. It's like
yeah.
so well
It,
done on TTS.
it'll be interesting to see. Like I don't know how many or if any like real life tournaments I'm going to be able to get to once it clears up. Just because of where I live in the world and my like financial situation.
We're gonna make you do it. We did it with Glass. We're gonna
Yeah,
do it with you.
I,
Damn it.
I would like to go at some point to something, but like I'm definitely not going to be able to be like a circuit player, right?
Yeah.
But it will be really neat to see what lessons like translate back to like the true tabletop from the online scene,
Yeah.
and how play there changes. Yeah, it'll be really neat to keep up with.
Well, fair warning. First time we're actually in a room together, you're getting a big ass hug.
Yeah,
Thank you.
looking forward to it.
Thank you so much for coming on, brother. Is there anything else that we didn't cover that you would like to?
Trying to think. Did you have a sec? Did you want to talk about best of threes?
Sure. Let's talk about that because you have done 2 of those now.
Yeah,
Yeah. So best of threes. For people that are listening that may not be familiar, the last 2 majors that have been done on the TTS format, the BATS and now the no, not the WWO, the Transatlantic Open, have been, but the finals are actually a best of 3 format. So the first person, it's kind of like paper rock scissors, best of 3. The first person to get 2 out of 3 wins, basically.
yeah.
Um, and now we have a veteran of 2 of that back to back. The only 2 that we've had in the game. He's been there.
Huge sample size, right? Huge sample size.
Yes, yes. So what
uh,
do you think of that? Like, what do you want to cover on that?
yeah, I just want to start off by saying I love best of threes. They're like a super fun way to play the game.
Uh huh.
Um, it, if people are looking to like practice, I would be really down to like practice in that format. Maybe not in like back to back to back, but
Uh
I
huh.
think it's a great format to play. Um, and I just thought there's like some really neat mind games that go on in them.
Yeah.
Um, but I had 2 very different experiences in it. Like I play a lot with Shane,
Uh huh.
so that's best of three. I knew him very well as a player. Um, so there wasn't much of like a feeling out process, if that makes sense.
Right. So, like,
Um,
just really quickly, people might not know this about you, but you have a mental catalog of the player. Like I should have covered this in the prep section. You have a thing like the other night you and I played, and you kept your leader in reserve the first 2 turns because you knew I tend to gravitate towards death from or cut off the head
yeah,
for that early swing that I was just talking about, right? So, yeah,
yeah,
so that's what you have going on coming into the best of 3. You kind of know the player already, right?
yeah. Well, that's the thing. In the bats one, I really did. For this one, I think I've maybe played Danger Throw once or twice in prep. Once was like even before bats, and then once was in bats prep. So I really didn't know him very well as a player. So I thought it was really neat that there wasn't really much feeling out going on in the bats final for either of us. I think it was we both really knew what we wanted to do, and we were trying to like push it hard. But I really enjoyed the feeling out process of the best of 3 in the TAO final. Because you really don't know what to expect from the other guy going in, and just having 2 or 3 games in a row, you've got to figure it out pretty quick. There were some like interesting, early on I was making some moves that I thought were a little questionable, but I wanted to do them just to kind of see how he would react. So that I could maybe push certain elements harder later in the game.
That's very interesting.
I think against the Cobalite list, I ended up playing like I didn't play my normal like sit back Drukhari answer that I was doing against the Mandrake spam, just because he had so much shooting on the board as well. I thought I maybe had to get into his face a bit. So like I think turn 1 I ended up having I moved Rouse onto his side of the board onto one of his objectives. I wanted to see if he would charge him with a Cobalite Warrior. I remember thinking at the time I was debating this move, and I was like, Shane charges him. Rouse only has 1 wound left. I know how Shane plays Drukhari, and he would take that charge like 100% of the time. It's like, but I don't know if Danger is going to do it.
Right.
And so in the end, I made the move because I knew that, like, okay, at least that will tell me something about how Danger thinks about this game, right?
Yeah.
And he didn't take the charge. And so for the rest of that match, in like turns 3 and 4, again, I was playing pretty forward with some of my models that I wouldn't against other players.
Right.
But just having kind of sussed out that information early on.
That's really interesting, because like doing commentary, we were talking about like the back and forth guesswork that happens through the list building, but you're actually doing that on the board.
Yeah, and I love that side of things. And so I don't know. While I'm on your platform here, I just wanted to kind of promote that format. I think there's some really cool mind games that start to happen in back games. I know realistically it's not something that most people have time for in like large formats, but it would be cool even just to see like a best of 3 like small pod or something, and just
dude, yes, like I know it's not practical, like you were just saying, like for every game, things like that, but ideally I would like best of 3 every game. Because like you see a lot of times, you'll have a great player who comes in and their opponent runs a jank list that just catches them, and then that's it. And now, here's this guy who, like we've talked about before, drove for a couple hours, paid a lot of money, all this stuff, who's just out of the tournament. No coming back from that. And it's like, dude, they should have a chance now to still recover from that, and come back and play the game. And plus it's like you'll sometimes you get to a point where that you've lost early on, and it's like, dude, I know exactly what to do, and you're just wishing that you could re-rack.
And I think those are such good learning tools. Like I would really encourage people, like even if there's never any pod that goes through with this, I would encourage people in their practice to do a best of 3. Like same matchup, maybe even same board, like same deployment even. Because I think seeing how someone responds to something that gave them a problem is like such a good learning experience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I can't tell you how many games, like I think you and I were talking about it the other day, how often with really high level players in our practice games, they end up being super one-sided.
Yeah.
one person makes like a mistake in deployment or muster or like turn one movement, and it gets punished so hard that the game's over at that point, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I always think that the second game is just so interesting. Like, what adjustments does this other really good player make so that doesn't happen anymore?
Yeah.
Right? And just seeing
dude, yes.
their
Yep.
yeah, seeing their process into like how they would problem solve that. Is it in their list? Is it just something as simple as like a few movement differences and the game might look completely different, right?
Yep. Or maybe it was a dice thing. Maybe like there's so many games where it's like the person has it, and then like turn 3, some crazy dice swing happens, and that's it. It's just like, oh no. That's why, and plus it's like super interesting. I've always said that Kill Team is the better modern game than Big 40K because of like the streaming possibilities and the excitement and things like that. And the best of 3 is just the next level of that because it is so exciting to have a 1 win, 1 loss, 1 win kind of a thing going on in it. Now it's this game 3 and it's both of them, and it's like, holy crap, moments butt puckered. What's going to happen? That is the stuff Legends are made out of, and I'd love to see more of that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's so much more to learn in like in that kind of format than I think part of the thing that makes Kill Team hard to learn is just how many different matchups there are, and then on top of that, there's also a million different packets and a million different boards, right?
Yeah.
Having like a really controlled repetition, like same matchup, same player, same packet, it really helps you learn your mistakes faster, I think, and how to fix them.
Yep. No, and like I was just explaining this to somebody last night, that picking up models and putting them back in the case before you've had a chance to express the idea is not a learning situation.
Yeah.
Like if you're just being punished in the thing, that didn't teach you as much. So it's like, maybe try again, bring something different, try a different faction, maybe something like that, and get a chance to, especially if you're learning, if you're new to the game, get a chance to express some of this and figure things out. Well, maybe that was a valid thing, but my guy just can't stand up to any Overwatch whatsoever. If they get a hit, he's just dead. Tough 3 with a 5-up save, that's it. And whatever. So it's like, it's hard to, when it's a best of 1, a lot of times it's harder to learn, I think.
Yeah, because people will get really it's hard to identify too in like a best of 1 where the like how the dice affected it, like what was outside of the normal probability range, right? Like especially in prep, people will maybe like discard something too fast because they lost the game with it,
right?
And
that's
maybe they just got diced. Maybe if they tried that same matchup 2 more times, they would have been like, you know what, I don't actually have to change anything.
Yeah.
Maybe I got lucky the first time. I was making the right moves, but it was just an outlier moment,
No, it's really interesting that you're saying this, because it's kind of like a similar result to what Alex and Emmanuel were talking about from Strategic Advantage when they were on the podcast, how they were talking about the importance of a regular practice partner where you're grinding out kind of the same match against the same opponent a lot, and you're kind of getting to the same thing when you're going to be doing best of 3 prep. Yeah, because it's like, okay, now you get to see, was this statistical variance? Is it just a bad list? Did I make a bad move? Rather than like, okay, you get 3 games before a big tournament or something, you've still got models to paint, and you've got to have it figured out by this deadline. Yeah, it's just a different kind of an experience, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's like you were saying, it could be like those are 3 very valid spots where it could be you could have gone wrong in a game, and I think a very experienced player might be able to pinpoint what the problem was off of 1 game.
Yep.
But unless you're a very experienced player, I think you can very easily mix up one of those for another off of just 1 game, and maybe go back and adjust the wrong area. Like maybe you made a movement error and you adjust your roster to compensate.
Right.
Right? Maybe you mustered wrong, but you adjust your movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think even for the best players, like I think you really should run a few reps, just to double check that, right? Like it's like, okay, I adjusted my roster. Now let's see, did that solve the problem or did I fix the wrong thing, right?
Yeah. No, and TTS has made this glaringly obvious because like we've had isolated metas where somebody could have been the top dog where they were, come in
Yeah.
and they're not as good as they thought. And so like having the exposure to the different lists and things like that might be more eye opening than playing, something and getting like false data, I guess, would be the thing. So like having multiple players where you can do that, play a couple games with before a big tournament would just be really interesting, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All right. So is there anything else, just Micro as a player that we should cover that you think
Oh man,
could translate to other people, or did we get everything out?
yeah, I think that's everything I need to get off my chest.
All right. Well, yeah, like I said, fair warning, you're getting a hug next time. If you ever get out to LVO or something, hope that we
Great.
can make that happen. COVID hopefully isn't going to be a thing forever. So things are
Yeah.
looking up, and it's been a pleasure playing you. These past few months, I think we're like 9 months now of doing TTS grinding. Um,
Hmm.
I think you're a very clean player. I think that you handle rules disputes well. Would be something that I would suggest people watch your games to learn about how you phrase things. I would just like you to be really clean here, if that's okay. You know what I mean? Like things like maybe it's a Canadian thing, but you are assertive yet positive, and you get things how you want it to be, without a lot of like now the person's upset or something, and it's going to be a contentious thing, something to that effect. There's just a lot good about you as a player, and people can watch you play. I think almost nightly if they go to the Command Point Discord, link in the description, and join up in that Discord. What a lot of people might not know if they're not part of this is that when we're doing prep games, most of us it's simply press stream now button. These aren't necessarily all going to be recorded and put to YouTube somewhere. Sometimes you'll get these amazing games that it's like the end of Blade Runner where he's talking about, in time these memories will be lost like tears in the rain or something. You'll just have like the most amazing games that you'll never ever be able to watch again. They were just streamed live as the person was prepping it. So if you're not part of that Discord, you guys are missing out. Come over, come join, come play games with me and Micro, and sign up for the tournaments that are there all the time, right?
Yeah, the server's just exploding. It's crazy. There's new people all the time,
Yeah,
and it's just great to get to know them and see them grow.
absolutely. And the etiquette there, I get asked about this quite a bit. Like, oh, is it weird to lurk and watch somebody's game? Yeah, you just come in, mute your mic, and watch them play their game. Watch them
Yeah,
do it, and it's like you will learn. You'll get to see, oh, he's running this too. I'm interested in that faction. Oh, he took this. I didn't think of that. There's just so much there for you, waiting, and it's free. It's just like, man, come on in.
yeah,
There's no reason not to. But anyways, thank you so much for coming on, Micro. I wish you nothing but the utmost success in the WWO that's coming up, and then now you're already part of Zenith. You're already qualified for that because of your recent win for the Transatlantic Open, and we'll be following you there. Expecting great things and looking forward to see how you do.
great. Yeah, thanks for having me on again. I love talking Kill Team. So anytime.
Well, take care, brother.
Take care.